The wind howled like a ghost through the granite teeth of the Joran Mountains, churning snow into flurries that danced and vanished like phantoms. Visibility was a joke. Even advanced recon drones struggled in this mess. But that didn't stop the Zarthak Dominion from marching into the sector like it already belonged to them. Their armor was pristine, shimmering in dull matte blue plating over sinewy, tall alien forms, 8 feet average, reptilian jaws, confidence dripping from every footstep, and arrogance, God, so much arrogance. Primitive slug throwers, seriously? One of them said with a high, grinding laugh, kicking over a rusted rifle half buried in the snow. No wonder they lost. There were 20 of them, part of an elite scouting force sent to mop up resistance in Earth's former colony. Their boots crunched over ash-frozen trails, stepping over the corpses of the last human defense squad. They didn't even bother to scan the mountains properly. This wasn't war anymore. This was cleanup. The mountains stretched for miles, silent and still, layered in snow that blanketed everything. Except one thing, a speck, unseen, buried into the high ridge above, wrapped in white. Callan Voss watched them through a high-powered scope, breath held, trigger slack. His heartbeat was so slow it barely ticked in his ears. His face was smeared with snow dust, beard matted to his scarf. He hadn't moved in hours. A relic rifle rested on the frozen rock in front of him, bolt action, long-barreled, wrapped in heat sink tape and customized by hand. No lights, no tracking beacon, no batteries, just powder, steel, and the quiet promise of death. The Dominion's scanners wouldn't pick up a thing. The cold had swallowed all signals. Voss had become part of the mountain. They didn't know he was there. They didn't know anything, really. He adjusted slightly, slow as glacier drift. One alien, an officer, judging by the chest insignia, barked into a comm unit, ordering the ER squad to spread out and establish a relay post. The others fanned into the open snowfield, some unloading equipment, others cracking jokes in their native clicks and screeches. Voss watched the officer's jaw flap open mid-sentence. The shot rang, like thunder cracking against the sky. The alien's head vanished in a red vapor, his body toppled backward, legs twitching. The other soldiers dove for cover too late. Panic crackled across their comms. They scanned the ridges, sweeping energy rifles in wide arcs. But there was no energy reading, no trace. Contact. We've got a contact. Where the hell? I see nothing. What was that, some kind of malfunction? The remaining 19 scrambled behind snowdrifts, eyes wide, tongues flicking out to taste the air. Voss didn't move. He didn't need to. The rifle's recoil had already settled back into the ice. He exhaled slowly, condensation curling around his scarf. He reached into his pouch and thumbed another round, hand-loaded brass tipped with tungsten, into the chamber. He closed the bolt with a quiet click. Down in the valley, an alien screamed, "That wasn't energy. That was chemical-based. Who still uses those?" Voss didn't smile. He just blinked once and muttered under his breath. One down. Snow whispered secrets as it slid across the rocks, covering tracks, smoothing out bloodstains, reclaiming the world for the cold. Hours passed since the first kill. The aliens had stopped laughing. Callan Voss remained motionless in his nest beneath a jagged outcropping, his breath shallow, his body packed in snow. His mind drifted, because waiting was part of the job. Waiting and remembering. He'd been left behind. Evacuation had been chaos. Civilians first, then military assets. But by the time command realized the Zarthak were coming in faster than predicted, priorities changed. The mountain defense perimeter was sacrificed to buy time for the exodus. Voss had been posted there with a unit of 8. When the Dominion arrived in orbit, they were told to hold. When the transports didn't come, they knew they were ghosts already. 7 died in the first week. He buried what pieces he could. The last one, Harrow, bled out from plasma burns, mumbling about a dog he'd left back on Titan base. Voss stayed. He didn't see it as revenge, just math. They sent 20 in. He would make sure none left. Below, a pair of insectoid drones skated low over the snow, wings tucked and sensors glowing blue. Voss didn't flinch. He'd stacked reflective snowbanks on 3 sides and laid his rifle on a slab of frozen rock that matched the thermal signature of dead stone. The drones passed overhead. One hesitated. Its lens shifted toward him. He closed his eyes. Wind gusted. Snow swirled. When he opened them again, the drones were gone. They brought tech. I brought patience. That had been his mantra. Back on Earth during training at West Ridge, instructors hammered speed, aggression, maneuver. Voss learned something else. How to sit in silence for a week without twitching. How to become terrain. How to hear lies in the wind. He checked his rifle, slow and deliberate. Still clean, still cold, still ready. Through the scope, he watched the aliens again, now much more cautious. They'd dragged the officer's body behind a rock and begun triangulating the trajectory. One soldier knelt with a scanning wand, its energy field stuttering in the cold. Another adjusted his thermal visor, blinking rapidly. Voss counted silently. 1, 2, 3. He fired. The soldier adjusting his visor crumpled forward, visor shattered, jawbone gone. Screams filled the comms again. The wand carrier fled behind a ridgeline, slipping on a patch of ice. Voss didn't bother with a second shot. Let the fear spread. He shifted positions after the shot, crawling 2 meters to the left along a narrow ledge, brushing away evidence behind him with a slow sweep of his boot. By the time the drones returned, he was gone. Blatiger, Kroshin was furious. He barked orders in harsh Zarthaki dialect, demanding air support, scan net overlays, and immediate suppression bombardment. But orbital support had been pulled after a larger, human resistance was detected in the equatorial basin. They were alone up here, just 20, now 18, against a ghost with a rifle. Kroshin ordered recon teams out in staggered formation. 3 groups of 2, full combat loadouts, no unnecessary tech. Just eyes, instincts, and silence. Voss watched them fan out from the cliffs, tiny figures against the snow-slick rock. He marked them with red grease pencil on the back of his glove, then circled north, climbing along an old comms tower skeleton that rose out of the mountainside like a fossil spine. He waited until 2 of the aliens reached the wreckage of a human outpost, long abandoned, its roof collapsed and solar panels shattered. One of them moved inside. The other lingered outside, muttering into a transmitter. Voss aimed low and fired. The shot clipped the alien's knee, not fatal, but loud and messy. As the other rushed out to assist, Voss took his second shot, center mass. He left both bodies where they fell. By the time their locator beacons blinked red, the snow was already covering them. Later that evening, Kroshin found a casing left deliberately on a flat boulder overlooking the camp. Carved into the side, scratched with a knife. Still watching. By the 3rd night, the remaining aliens huddled close to their deployable heaters, weapons always in hand. Their powered armor was starting to malfunction. Coolant lines froze. Servo motors twitched. One soldier's leg locked up mid-patrol and he had to be carried back, cursing the entire way. Their thermal visors were worse. Designed for humid jungles and warm planets, they fogged constantly. Half their squad now moved blind in the cold, relying on proximity sensors and instinct. The Dominion hadn't prepared for this kind of warfare. They didn't think they'd need to, and that was the difference. Voss remembered a lesson from a forgotten sniper manual. A poor shooter blames his rifle. A dead shooter blames nothing. He moved at dusk now, skirting the edge of vision, always one step ahead. He knew the shape of these mountains, the way most men knew the inside of their homes. He slept in an ice cave with a thermal blanket and a half-eaten protein bar. He hadn't used his radio in a month. He wrote names in the snow with his knife just to stay sane. But the mission was clear. When another recon pair didn't report back, Kroshin didn't send more. He pulled everyone into a tighter perimeter. They buried their wounded inside the wrecked outpost, hoping maybe cold stone would keep them safer than open air. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were prey. Voss watched from high above, eyes steady behind his scope. He didn't feel joy. This wasn't vengeance, this was discipline, calculation. The quiet art of reminding the galaxy that humans were never as simple as they seemed, and that out here, in the cold, the mountain chose sides. Crochan's engineers thought they were clever. If visual scans failed and thermal imaging couldn't pierce the blizzards, they'd use sound. The new plan rolled out at dawn, deploying tri-sensor audio triangulators every 50 meters, synced to detect even a breath out of place. They called it the net. Voss called it cute. He knew the snow-distorted noise that wind in the peaks could carry a whisper a mile or swallow a scream at arm's length. The terrain here wasn't just rough, it shifted. Echoes bounced, sounds warped. Crochan's engineers didn't account for how mountains lied, so Voss helped the net lie louder. He retrieved an old helmet from one of the fallen aliens and strapped it to a fallen branch, tying it to a snow hare corpse. He dragged it along a ridge using a thin nylon cord from half a kilometer away. The bait creaked and shuffled. A sound. Spike hit the net's grid. The aliens pounced. 4 of them rushed the signal, weapons primed. One fired into the snow, another tossed a flash grenade that detonated against a rock wall, lighting nothing. When the confusion settled, all they found was a half-frozen animal and a helmet with a smiley face scratched on it. Above them, Voss breathed slowly, adjusting his scope. He'd placed a hollow between 2 boulders days ago just for this, a dead zone. Their triangulators couldn't read anything clearly inside it. Sound bent inward. As the squad swore and regrouped, he took a shot. The lead alien's spine shattered on impact. He twitched and collapsed. The other 3 bolted in, different directions. That was the mistake. Voss waited, counted, shifted, fired again. Another collapsed against a stone ledge, throat pierced. No tech in the world could stop a man who listened better than machines. But Voss didn't stop with shots. He started playing with the terrain. He'd spent the last few days stacking snow loosely over the edges of a high ridgeline. When another patrol moved beneath it, he triggered a collapse with a well-placed impact round. The cascade hit hard. Ice and rock and sheer terror. One alien got buried to his waist and screamed as the cold seized his limbs. Another broke his leg on the fall. Voss didn't shoot them. He just let the mountain do the work. They dragged themselves back, limping, silent, half-mad from whiteout exposure. Their armor was dented and freezing, power cells drained faster by the cold. The Dominion hadn't designed it for this. The suits needed warm-blooded body cores to regulate internal functions, and in these peaks, everything was dying slowly. Voss remembered his training from Earth's old sniper corps, long before the war. Back when they still made soldiers earn silence, instructors had buried him in snow, told him not to blink for hours, not to move when squirrels ran over his chest. They taught him how to dig a coffin of cold and disappear into it, how to slow his breathing until his heart ticked like a metronome, how to let the environment speak instead of instinct. That training made him dangerous. But out here, it made him legend. The aliens began whispering around fires, about a ghost in the mountains, a human who had become one with the frost. Some said he never ate, never slept. Others said he was the mountain, that the first humans had buried a god here, and Dominion boots had desecrated the grave. One soldier refused to go on patrol. Crochan shot him in the chest and told the others to find the myth and kill him. But fear was rooting deep. Voss didn't give them time to regroup. He left traps, like a comms unit on a loop that broadcast breathing sounds in the old Earth tongue. When 2 aliens tracked it and knelt to inspect it, Voss watched from a position he'd held for 18 hours, buried in a snow hollow so deep his legs had lost feeling. When the medic accompanying them opened his scanner, Voss pulled the trigger. The medic died before the scanner did. 18 hours. For one shot. The thing was, Voss didn't care about the numbers anymore. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting so they'd never forget what happened when they laughed at Earth's rifles. Crochan snapped eventually. He began marching with the remaining troops, yelling instead of commanding, stripping gear from the dead, screaming into the snow. The Dominion had sent an elite force, and now they were eating protein bricks in caves, hallucinating frost shapes in the dark, blaming cursed air and ghost rituals, and finally, when only 7 of them remained, Voss spoke. He used the alien comms, cracking the frequency like he'd practiced for days. He waited until dead quiet just after midnight, when the wind had stilled and only the crunch of Kroshen's boots echoed between boulders. A voice crackled through their helmets. Calm, deep, human. You should have stayed in orbit. Silence. Then, Kroshen screamed, raw and primal, ripping his helmet off, tossing it down a ravine and roaring at the mountains. The others just stared into the darkness. One of them whispered, "The mountain doesn't want us here." And Voss, a kilometer away, smiled for the first time in weeks. The voice came at dawn, young, desperate, familiar. "Help. This is Voss. Anyone. I'm pinned near Ridge Point Alpha. Broken leg. Need evac. Please." Static crackled, then silence. Voss didn't move. He lay prone on a narrow shelf halfway up a frozen chute, his cheek pressed to the rifle's stock. The voice wasn't him. He knew it. He'd never spoken like that into a comm. Too clean, too rehearsed. But still, they had taken his old comm logs. He'd heard his own words twisted before, and they chose Ridgepoint Alpha for a reason. It was where Harrow bled out, where his unit made their last stand. They wanted a reaction. Voss didn't give them one. Instead, he glassed the ridgeline through his scope, scanning for lens flare, heat shimmer, unnatural indentations in the snow. Then he saw it. The curvature of a tense shadow didn't match the sun's angle, and below the decoy signal the slope bore drag marks, recent, shallow, brushed over but still fresh. A trap, and not a bad one. Voss crawled backward from the ledge, every movement slow and precise. He circled high, climbing a ridge of black ice scarred by wind and time. From the top he could see the full layout of the trap. 3 figures hidden beneath insulated camo tarps, triangulated on the false signal, heat diffusers masking their tech. But Voss didn't go for them. He went higher. The command tent was 50 meters back, tucked beneath a glacial overhang. It was well concealed, flanked by shattered rock and coated in a thin ice sheen, almost invisible from below. No guards, no visible movement. But Kroshen would be there. He was done trusting subordinates. Voss unpacked the mirror tiles he'd stolen from the wrecked drones, each one the size of a playing card. He placed them along a line of exposed ice, catching the morning light, bending it through a narrow passage to create a ghost reflection across the mountain's face. From below, it looked like movement, just enough to draw the decoy's gaze, the wrong way. As they repositioned, Voss inched down, sliding beneath an overhang, into a trench carved by centuries of wind-scoured meltwater. No sound, no trail. The tent's rear wall shimmered faintly, layered in ice so thin it looked like glass. Through it he could see Kroshen pacing. The alien leader had removed his helmet. His eyes were bloodshot, face drawn, lips cracked from cold and dehydration. He wasn't yelling now. He was muttering to himself, slapping frost from a datapad that no longer powered up. All the bravado was gone. Only obsession remained. Voss breathed in. 1 second. 2. 3. He adjusted his scope, calculating for ice thickness, refraction, wind resistance. The shot wasn't difficult by Earth standards, but here, at altitude, through glass, air, and silence, it had to be perfect, and he didn't feel anger or triumph. Just gravity. Voss pulled the trigger. The bullet punched through the ice wall, curved slightly with the layered cold, and caught Kroshen just above the left eye. There was no sound but the soft thud of a body hitting synthetic flooring. Outside, the decoy team didn't even hear the shot. By the time they realized what had happened, it was over. One found the body. Another screamed into the comms. The third dropped his weapon and began running down the slope, slipping, half tumbling through snow. Voss let them go. He listened as the final message broadcast through static across the alien channel, tight, clipped, and in perfect Zarthaki. Do not engage Earth snipers. Ever. The remaining troops called for extraction. Voss watched the dropships come. Dark specks against a brightening sky. They descended with care. No aggressive landings, no posturing. Just silent retrieval. No shots fired. No questions asked. The Dominion came to conquer. They left in retreat. Voss stood at the edge of a cliff as the last of them lifted off, engines roaring faintly against the frozen silence. The snow blew sideways around him, catching in his beard, brushing the rim of his rifle's scope. In the ice near his feet, he dug a shallow hole and placed a small metal journal wrapped in weatherproof cloth. Inside, he'd written every name, every shot, every lesson. They had tech, we had time. He buried it with a flat stone. The mountain would remember. Voss looked across the peaks, white stretching to forever. The wind picked up again, carrying echoes of voices, of boots, of distant fear. He chambered around, then slowly clicked the bolt back open. Just a ritual. Just to hear the sound. Then he whispered into the cold. In these mountains, Earth speaks in echoes and bullets.